cowbell. Welcome one and all to the dedication ceremonies at the Pioneer Museum of the Pipestone Creek. It is such a great pleasure for me to say hurrah, we have reached our goal, the restoration and preservation of the Pipestone Creek store here at our village. Strange how these things come about. Stella Watts was on the board of directors and always had so many interesting stories to tell of her life. India, England, marrying A.K. Watts, the honeymoon cabin, farming, storekeeping, her family, and most of all, her love for books. Quite a friendship grew as I listened to her stories, and listening is a lot easier than reading, as the more excited she got when she was reminiscing, the worse her writing was, and we just couldn't read it. We published a book a few years ago, and Stella wanted to do something for this publishing business. And we pondered and looked for a job that a lady in her late 80s could do. And finally, the index. Stella could do the indexing. But what did she come up with? She came up with about 50 names that went into the index, but she had stories written about each one of these people. So we ended up with a miniature book within the book. Pipestone Creek became important to us, but we knew it was the home of the Donna and Betty McAllisters. And finally a spot was available at the Pioneer Museum, and the stories of Stella's about the Pipestone Creek area just kind of all fit in with what we're looking for in preserving the heritage and history in the outlying areas of Grande Prairie. Our museum includes the district around the city. And finally, the McAllisters got a new home. So it all kind of, everything seems to have a reason for happening. So here we are at the dedication ceremony. And Doug Clarkson is one of our directors, and he's on the properties and maintenance. So we'll ask Doug to say a few words about how it all came about as far as he was concerned. Doug?
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all enjoy the afternoon. I think it'd be right to say that this is a pioneer store, and perhaps trading post would probably be a fitting description of it. And this reminds me of a little story of one of the early stores in Grande Prairie. Not the first one, but the Crummy brothers ran a store in Grande Prairie in the early days, before the railroad got here. And one day Joe Crummy was in charge of the store. An Indian chap came in and bought a bunch of traps, paid for them, and he wanted a receipt. So Joe says, "You don't need a receipt." "Oh yeah, I want a receipt." "Well, why do you want a receipt?" "Well," he says, "suppose I die. I go to heaven, St. Peter say, 'You be good Indian?'" "Oh yes." "You pay him all debt?" "Yes." "Show me the receipt." He says, "I don't want to have to hunt all over hell to find you to get a receipt." This store, as you see today, and you'll see inside when as soon as we open it up, you'll be free to go in and have a look-see. I think it could be properly called a monument to volunteers. It's practically all volunteer work that went into it. Some things were hired, but it's nearly all volunteer work. And I don't like to start naming volunteers because I always miss some, but I'm going to name some today because there was some really big contributions made by volunteers here on this project. And if I miss anybody, I want you to know that we appreciate what you did as well. Thank the McAllister family for donating the building. That is the big part of the project that started the whole ball rolling. And then there was those who helped get it ready to move. I think Wayne Shank and Nick Bouquet helped take the chimneys down. Johnny Stark was out and helped take the porch away. And we had a very good mover that moved the building in here. It came in very good shape. He's right here today. Where is he over here? Mr. Morrison, right here. First class. This good-looking fella right here. He made a good job of it. And have to thank Eric Dalen for rebuilding the chimney. Ken Dalen, building the chimney. He donated his time to build the chimney. And there was a whole crowd of people here in the yard. I've forgotten who all they were, putting in the foundation, rigging up the forms and pouring the cement. And Johnny Stark, his expertise of putting the logs under it, quite a few new logs had to go into there, underneath there. But there was one person that has done hours and days and weeks, and I think I should say months of work here, that's really contributed a great deal to this finished product you see here today. And that is Frank Stowe. We couldn't have made it without Frank Stowe. Where's Frank? Should be here. Oh, he's right over there, is he? I can't see him. Anyway, it's all as near back to what it used to be as we could make it. We couldn't get everything just the way we would like to have had it, but we got as close as we could. And I'll not take up any more of your time. I want to again thank all the volunteers who helped, and I hope you enjoy the store this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. The city of Grande Prairie sent a representative, and that is in the form of Marion Howard. Where's Marion? There she is.
Thank you. Mrs. Watts, your family, ladies and gentlemen, and particularly all the people that I can't believe that are here from out of town, welcome to Grande Prairie. This is indeed an honor. It's a time to thank the people that are working on the museum, working down here now. For 30 years, there have been volunteers going back to Mel Roddiker's dream vision. I look around and I wonder if he would have even visionized that we would have so many buildings. Thank you, everybody, for the last 30 years of work, and Mel, too. I want to, seeing I've got the mic, I'm going to indulge. I was privy when the Watts lived in the house to have dinner there more than once. And I want to go back and talk about that. Mrs. Watt had been raised in a privileged few in India. She set a beautiful table with damask. It was just beautiful. I, at that time, hadn't eaten that way. Then she brought out two things the first time we were there that I've never had an opportunity to see things like this since. One was a stamp collection from all over the world that dated back to the 1700s. And the other thing that she had was an original manuscript of Beethoven's. You know, this is what built this country. It's the people that came and brought with it things like that. Thank you, Mrs. Watt. Thank you, everybody from the Pioneer.
Thank you very much, Marion. Olive Stickney. Olive is coming forward with some greetings from the county. And we had quite a contest here before all this happened when we decided that Olive was going to be the one to do a little talk for us. What color hat was she going to wear? And then she came with none.
Anyway, Alice sent me back to the car to get my hat, because I'm not very important, but my hats are. Anyway, I was invited by Alice to come on behalf of the county, and I guess it's very appropriate since I'm an ex-county councillor, and we're going back in history today, so you go back with me in history. The only thing that's update about my connection with the county is the fact that my car says County 1. And that's been my joke on all the county councillors, because they all would like to have continued to be County 1. And so my license plate is traditional. Actually, there's another reason why it's a delight for me to be here today, because my mother was one of the few women, if there were any others, I don't know, that came in the very early days and settled on a homestead in the Valhalla area. I've never met another family whose mother came alone with 3 small children. So it was quite an effort that she made. Now, we've always heard about Pipestone Creek. We've always heard about the Pipestone Creek store. And I understood that after the proprietor died, that his wife ran the store for another 7 or 8 years. And so women have played a great part as well. There wouldn't be a Peace River country nor a population without us women. And so congratulations to the museum, to their forethought in bringing this building in. And I guess all of us need to pay tribute to Mr. Clarkson and to Frank Stoll, who have done so much work, and I'm sure there are others that will be mentioned today. And to Alice, she's a great person to head this up.
Thank you very much, Olive. You've got to bear with me. I've got a terrible scratchy throat here. It's bad enough at the best of times, but the Legion is here, and I think John St. Arnold, are you going to be the one to do the Legion, or are some of your colleagues? I think we're going to have John don 2 hats today.
Again?
Again.
Thank you. I guess I'm about the only Indian here. But I'll tell you. You have the majority of the population, and where we have a minority. And this white man advertised that he wanted 50 men to go and do 1 day's work he wanted to get done. Nobody showed up, but this one Indian showed up, and he said, "Where's the rest of them?" He said, "You asked," he said, "for 50 white men." He said, "For 1 day, I'll do it for half a day." Mrs. Watts and her 2 daughters, the pioneers of Pipestone Creek, Ray Campbell. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Of course, you all know that, I've got a crooked nose, and the reason why I have it, but I've got too big a mouth, and it always gets me into trouble. The last board meeting we had to the committee, and they said maybe we should have a little Legion representative, seeing that Mr. Watts had served in 2 world wars. And we also had a chapter of the Canadian Legion in Pipestone Creek, and started in 1945, and some of us that started that art here. Keith Giroux here, Lloyd, and
Don McAllister and us that had started that. So being the Pipestone Creek store itself, when it started, it kind of opened the door to the north for the Indian people that lived out in the wilderness. And Mr. Watts opened a trading post down south around Porcupine River in the winter time, and my dad would pack in the supplies for him the years that they were there. And Mr. Watts also come up with all the things that he's done among the Indian people, getting their family allowance for them and old age pension, and he had quite a contract with my mother doing most hide coats and moccasins and stuff like that. So he really done a lot among the Indian people that lived in that country on behalf of myself and the rest of the Indians that didn't show up. And branch number 54, you know, it is a great honor, it is a great pleasure for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We always get a good laugh because he never is the one that's going to talk and say anything. But we always get more than what we expected. Thank you again, John. Norman Eng, are you doing a little bit for the Legion to represent? Can you do it anyway? Just a few words. We don't expect much.
Norman, you don't have nothing to say for once in your life?
I wish they'd have told me to expect to have to say a few words, but all I can say is when Mr. Watts ran the store there, he used to be the correspondent for the Herald Tribune, and one of the things that we always looked forward to when we got the Herald Tribune to see what Mr. Watts had written. And he never really told a lie, but he sure could he sure could improve on the truth. But I don't know the people in south across the river there. We moved in there first in 1930, and I don't know what we would have done without Pipestone Creek store and Mr. and Mrs. Watts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norman. I wonder, Karen Young, where are you? Frank Stoll, would you come up and tell us what it meant to you?
Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to listen for a while. Things to talk about.
We cut them off in 5 minutes.
I would like to congratulate the Pioneer Museum and the staff in the moving, renovating the Pipestone Creek store on its new site. I was very skeptical when they decided that they were going to move it down here. It was a pretty rotten old building, and I didn't think it would be worthwhile to do all this work on it. But anyway, we got it done, and after many hours of restoring and painting and all these other things, we finally got it look like it is now. I have many happy memories of Pipestone Creek store. And having lived in the area for around in the neighborhood of 37 years, I remember the many meetings, both official and casual, with the Watts and the members of the community, the organizing of the school district. I was a board member when I was 19 years old. Church services held in the store and in the school, as well as outdoors in the summertime at the river in conjunction with the South Wapiti area. We haven't had agricultural meetings, and some of the officials from the Department of Agriculture or the Department of here in Grande Prairie would come out and talk to us. And out of one of these meetings, we decided that we needed some bulls in the area. So we formed a bull club, and in due time, the government sent us 3 different bulls that were stationed throughout the area: Louis Hawk's farm, and Louis McAllister farm, and Pipestone Creek store. And there's one little incident that happened when I took a cow down there with a saddle horse. Mr. Harry Hodson was living in the hired man's house, I guess you could call it, or in the other house at the store. And when I went to open the gate off of my horse, I must have tickled her in the ribs or something. Anyway, she started bucking with a cow tied on the saddle horn behind her, dumped me off under the gate, and this horse kept bucking, finally got her back foot over the rope and was kicking and bucking and one thing another. And Harry came out. It was on a Sunday morning, and he was in the act of shaving. We only shaved once a week in those days. But anyway, he came out and he says, "Grab her by the ear, grab her by the ear, you'll stop her." And she was just going, and I was under the fence watching her go. Anyway, it all worked out later on. I also remember one time when we were attending the South Wapiti school picnic, and there was a big rainstorm came, thunderstorm started. Percy Perry and his family and Irene and I and our kids decided to head for home when the rain thunderstorm quit. We got down to the river, and some of the hill had washed out when we came down. I had a Model A Ford, and I think this Percy Perry had a 28 Essex car. He had about 7 kids in his, and we had 2 in ours. But we got across on the ferry, got partway up on the hill on the other side, on this side coming home. And I don't know, we ran out of water in the radiator or something, this old Model A, and so we were stranded. Percy Perry took the clutch out of his Essex car and had to stay further down the hill, and we were all 9. Anyway, Irene and I put a little kid on each back and carried them up to Watts' store. He stuck his head out of this window right up above us here, and he said, "What do you want?" Maybe at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And we said we would like to get a team of horses to be able to go home. So he said, "Well, Joe Bean's team is in the barn," and John St. Arnold will verify to who Joe Beans is. His proper name was Joe St. Arnold, and it was John's uncle, I believe. Anyway, we went in the barn and harnessed up his team of horses and took them home. He was asleep in the bunkhouse. He didn't even know we had his team. But anyway, it kept raining, and I think the ferry went down the river about 5 o'clock the next morning. I was out hunting for cows to milk. We milked quite a few cows, and Ed Woods come walking up the road and said the ferry went down the river. And could he get a ride to Wembley? Well, we had gone down and picked up with the Perry family that was marooned on the hill with a 4-horse outfit on a wagon. We went to Wembley and dropped them off so they could come on the train back to Grande Prairie where they lived. And then Ed and I went out to Lake Saskatoon and got Bill Palmer's boat, took it down to the Wapiti River and brought some of the guys like Perry Highstead and Johnny Blair and some of those fellas across on the boat. The river was really high, and it was a wild time. About 2 or 3 months after that, they got the, I guess it was Canfor ferry from south of Grande Prairie here and took it up to Wembley, and that was what they had for a ferry later. These other people that were over at South Wapiti, they sort of got stranded. Quite a few of them over there came across later in boats, and I think that was the first road between South Wapiti and Grovedale. Some of the guys kind of wiggled out a road through the bush from the old Giroux farm and came around by the Grovedale ferry. It was quite an experience. I remember the organizing of the Pipestone Creek Mutual Telephone Company when a whole bunch of us banded together, got out poles and built lines, formed a company and built telephone lines, and we had 17 miles of telephone line by the time most of the winter was over, all working. We were pretty happy about that. We were getting pretty modern and we got a pole. We had many different meetings. We had to move the school at one time from one site to another. The families that were involved in that was the Hodgsons and the Bisgroves and the Pennies and I don't know how many different people, Wattses of course, and all these meetings, or a lot of these meetings took place at Pipestone Creek Store. And then when the Department of Highways built a road between South Wapiti and Grove, they had sort of spelled the end of the ferry at Pipestone Creek. But we formed another organization at that time that was called the Wembley Ferry Association. We had people in the west end of the county that were members of it mostly, and we kept that ferry going for about 3 years with Henry McCullough being the operator, and it was strictly a toll ferry in those days. But eventually we got another high water set up, and everything flooded out, and that ferry too came to an end. And it's parked down at Pipestone Creek Park right now, like anyone that gets down there to see it. Socially, our Christmas concerts and school picnics was about all that we ever had in the area. And we had a ladies' club to sort of sponsor those things. Like they did different things throughout the year, doing some knitting and different things for the Red Cross and for the support of these school picnics and Christmas concerts. We had a lot of good times. Quite often, in the spring of the year, we'd put on an evening of a few short plays. I can remember Vic Elford reciting the recitation of the Call of the Yukon, and it was very dramatic in that little old log schoolhouse back in the late 1940s and whatnot. And then with the passing of Mr. A.K. Watts, Mrs. Watts carried on the store for a few years after that, and finally when the ferry quit operating and so on, there wasn't much point in her keeping the store open anymore. The mail was rerouted by way of Grovedale. There was no mail at Pipestone Creek anymore. So she moved to Grande Prairie, and that more or less spelled the end of the Pipestone district. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. Hilda Bisgrove, have you got some memories? You'll never get away with that, Hilda. Come on. Hilda Bisgrove.
Well, this is an old-time thing for me. With our good old store in the old days. We used to come down to the store, and Mr. Watts to see you coming down the road, and he'd hang a sign up here. Special! Sugar! Special today! He'd try to flip you. He said, "I'll flip you for this." No. I done it once till I got beat. Wouldn't do that again. But anyway, we sure had a lot of fun down here. And there's barn dances he used to have, and a lot of good times. Yeah. What else? I got lots of stuff.
Have you got a short memory?
Real short. Oh, what should I tell about him? You come up here, Tim. Yeah, my dad, he was the son of a tumble bee. And every time we had to shift pigs or load them, and I think people around could hear it for 5 miles. I was always glad when we got them loaded and got away from him. You know Ray, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. And of course, I used to have to break horses for him. He'd get this here wild horse, never be rode, and he'd put me on that and tie it to his saddle horn, and of course, I'd go for the other ways, and I'd get bucked off. But it didn't take long, he put me back on. You go by yourself now, he said. I did. I learned to tame these horses. Yeah. Anyway, sure a nice crowd here. Nice to see all the old people. Old-timers, I should say. Not old people. Yeah, well, that's what.
Thank you very much, Hilda. See, now you don't have to shiver in your boots for another 3.5 hours. You got some more memoirs? Sounded like there was some good ones down in that corner down there. Or are they going to come later? Alita Baines, did she come?
Somewhere.
No? No? There she is. Okay, Vic Alford. I heard some of his stories before this all started today, so I know that there's some good ones coming there.
Oh, God, get the scoop shovel.
You know, standing here, first of all, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Pipestone Creek, I do remember it. I guess I'd be about 6-year-old, 5-year-old. But Hilda mentioned the old store. Now that reminds me of a little story that goes like this. This fellow was driving home and he seen this young girl walking. He picks her up. She looked beat and kind of weather torn, and takes her home, and she was hungry, so he fed her. And then, needless to say, the inevitable happened, and his wife comes home, catches him. She's mad. She grabs her suitcase. She throws some stuff in it. She's going to leave. And he said, "Hold it, honey. Before you go, you've got to hear how this all came about." Now, he said, there was that old roast. It was 2 days old. You said it was old and no good. You were going to throw it out. The young girl was hungry, so I fed it to her. He said there was that dress. You said it was old, out of style. You wouldn't wear it no more. Her dress was beat up, ragged, so I give it to her. And he said her coat, it was all tattered and torn. And you had that coat that was in the closet there. You said it was gray and out of style. You wouldn't wear it no more. You were going to throw it away. So I give her that. And she was just going to walk out the door, and she turned to me and said, "Is there anything else around here that's old that your wife don't use anymore?" So these old things, you know, I don't know, I think they're pretty good, maybe. But anyway, Pipestone Creek store here brings back one memory, a very early memory. It's to do with Ed Elford, my grandfather. He was in the store dealing with Mr. Watts, and Mr. Watts said, "There's this new," and a lot of you will remember it, unbreakable lamp glass. The lamp glasses used to be real thin, and they came out with that one that was a little thicker. You could drop it, and with luck it wouldn't break. Mr. Watts said to Granddad, "This is a new lamp glass. You can drop them, they won't break." Granddad was a avid gambler. He would bet on anything, as I think there's a lot of people here would know. Ray Campbell would remember. Granddad said, "You couldn't drop that and it wouldn't break. It would break and smash all to pieces." Alan Watts said, "I'll drop it, and if it breaks, I'll give you 2. If it don't break, you pay for 2. Alan Watts reached over that counter. I was a kid standing right there in that store. He dropped it, and lo and behold, the lamp glass did break. Granddad got 2 lamp glasses. Thank you.
I think he's got another good story here about chocolate bars.
Well, I wasn't really going to tell this, but I did tell it this morning here. But all you people would remember Dan. Now, Dad was very strict with us children. You never lied to my father, especially us kids did. But you try it, and I'll tell you now, there was going to be hide left on the ground when he finished with you. Russell, my older brother, and I came over here. But as a kid, this counter, to me, it seemed it was up here. But anyway, on top, there used to be a big old basket that had chocolate bars in it. And Russell and I were in there. I suppose I was the guilty one. Mr. Watts turned his back, grabbed up into the basket, got 2 chocolate bars, done whatever business we had the chocolate bars in our pocket, and went home. Didn't pay for the chocolate bars. We stole them. So we went out around the barn, took the wrappers off, ate the chocolate bars, left the wrappers laying, and Dad found them. Well, that would be about 1938, somewhere in there. Dad didn't have money to be buying candy for us kids, so he grabbed Russell and I. He knew we were over at the store. Where did you guys get these chocolate bars? Where'd you get the money? Well, we didn't get the money. We stole them. Come to the house. Well, I knew the belt or a club that, long and that big around was coming out. He said, now here's 10 cents. You guys go back to the store. You pay Mr. Watts. You tell him what you have done. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the worst licking I ever took in my life. I'd sooner had a licking from Dad than to have to go back and face Mr. Watts. But I guarantee you, Mr. Watts never lost no more chocolate bars with Russell and I. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dick. I didn't think we could omit that good little story. Now, Richard Brooks, is he here? There he comes. I think he's got some good stories that he'd like to share with you.
Well, I'm not going to try to top Victor's stories and Frank's stories. I do remember Pipestone Creek store very well. I was born and raised there. Actually, I lived in that district until I was 15. I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. There's a lady here who used to sell Mr. Watts and Mrs. Watts eggs. She got on a horse and usually rode down there. It's my mother. She's 85. She lived in the district for I don't know how many years, but a lot of years. She's Mrs. Campbell over here. Incidentally, she told me a story yesterday. She came to Grande Prairie 1916 on the first passenger train out of Edmonton to Grande Prairie. That's quite a while ago. Anyway, this store, as I said, has a lot of fond memories for me. I know that my dad hauled rocks, I'm told later, to build the foundation underneath it. I was down there yesterday, and there's a heck of a pile of rocks left there. And he did help on some of the log work. The store, when we were kids, was always I guess you'd call it a safe haven. Nowadays they have these block parent things. This was sort of a safe haven for a young fella, or a young person. If you were cold in the winter time, you could always go in here and get your feet warmed up. And several times, somehow or other, we always got stranded down at the store. Mrs. Watts would take you in and feed you and make sure you were well looked after. Also, another thing that Mrs. Watts did for us, always about, I'd say, November, about the time the first snow came down. Cecil, my brother, and I, who's here today, would get sent down to the store, and we'd get fitted out with moccasins and rubbers. Mrs. Watts would get some Indian moccasins out and make sure we got a good fit, some rubbers, and we were set for the winter. So she was pretty good to little kids down there. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to come up here. It's been a great pleasure, and I congratulate all the people that have worked on this thing. This has been a very pleasant couple of days for me, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of other people here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lost my page. I think there's somebody that's traveled an awful long ways to get here, and that's Gordon Asquith, and that is a cousin to Pat and Billy. Would you like to come and share some memories? He and his friend have traveled from Toronto to be here, and Billy was just ecstatic when she got that phone call, and she'd phoned me, and about 2 minutes after I'd hung up the phone, here she was again to tell me that this was happening, so it means a lot.
Thank you, Alice, and I just want to say that we're coming up here as a team because we came out here as a team in 1947. How we decided was that we had both been in the Army, and we had had 2 years of university, and we had wanted to have a summer off. So I said to Steve, I said, I'm going out west, will you come with me? And he said, sure. And we had the most wonderful summer of our lives, as far as I'm concerned, coming up here. We came up the lake on a grain boat and hitchhiked across the United States and up through Calgary and Edmonton and through the Gumbo into Grande Prairie. And it was a long, long trip, the last part particularly. Barefooted sometimes, as Steve said. I have always remembered Pipestone Creek from when I was early in my childhood, when we used to get letters from my uncle and Aunt Seela, and I can remember one of them, her writing, saying that she was writing the letter with her feet in the stove and trying to keep warm because it was 60 degrees outside, below zero outside, and every time her feet got warm, her back was cold, she'd turn around and she'd face away from the stove and continue the letter. That was one of the things. Then we heard about the first shack that they lived in, a sod hut. And when it rained outside one day, it rained for a week inside. And so when we arrived here, finally, I saw all the houses they'd lived in, all on the same spot. The original hut, and the second house, and then this house here. It was really quite wonderful to be here. And I think that just remembering a few of the things, well, why we were involved in this is that Alan wanted to go away on a holiday with Seela and the girls, and we said, well, why don't you go? We'll look after the store and the post office. So for a month, we ran the store and the post office, and I was the postmaster, and Steve milked the cows, and Alan Giroux did the work around the farm helping us. And it was just a wonderful experience because we did all sorts of things. We traded with people, we bought and sold moccasins, and always the moccasins we bought and sold were by size, but they couldn't measure up to Steve's feet. Show your feet, Steve. And John here said we were quite the worst crooks that ever dealt with the Indians. Anyway, Steve, come talk a little bit about...
Gordon, we arranged that you would speak about the store and I would speak about the outside. You've now stolen all my speech. But there used to be, and I'm telling you, but I can remember the warehouse across the yard from the store, which was where the hides and whatnot were purchased. And before Alan went away, he showed me the table, and there are lines on the table, and he said, if the skin is so big, you pay so much. If it goes to the next line, you pay more, and the next line, you pay even more. And Johnson Arnold is telling me that I kept moving those lines over. He's accusing me of being a harder man than AK ever was. And the story about the moccasins is true, because if you match them with a size 12 shoe, and they weren't army boots, but a size 12 shoe, the poor moccasins were always small, and we paid small, medium, and large. It was a different price. This experience here stood me in great stead, because the year after that I ended up in West Africa, running a trading post out there,
for 2 years, and the argument was if I could survive Pipestone Creek and trading with the natives and the inhabitants there, I could certainly manage in Africa. And that worked out well. But it's been a wonderful experience, and I think coming back today or this weekend and being remembered by so many people that I don't remember, and as soon as I tell them I was the one that had the beard, they know who I was. And it's really most interesting, and we would like to thank you again for your welcome and for the excuse for coming. Thank you very much.
Just one more story. We were working, clearing trees along the road with Alan Giroux and the tractor, and Steve was on the tractor. We're pulling these trees out by a chain, and Alan, who is a very quiet, slow-moving man, was watching, and we had got this tree hooked up, and as we pulled it out, instead of landing beside the tractor, it landed on Steve. Well, Steve went down underneath it. I was standing there watching it, and not knowing what to do, Alan was busy turning the tractor off, because otherwise it would move forward and Steve would have been under it. He saved Steve's life. All Steve had was a cracked rib. He was a wonderful guy, and I just wanted to remember him at this time. As we left Pipestone Creek, I remember him saying to me, "Gordon, remember the way back." And I felt as though I was leaving my own home. I felt so much the kindness and warmth of all you people and the people who had been here at that time. Well, we found our way back, and I'm so glad we did. This has been a wonderful experience for us to come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here and to know that you cared enough about the Great Peace River country and to get your feet in the gumbo again. Now, Pat Giroux, would you like to come forward? Pat has been so worried about this for so many days, and she's going to do such a fine job of it. Here she comes. She has to have her sister hold her hand for her. She wants her mama.
Mother, Mrs. Sheila Watts. We greet people who have gathered from far and wide today. I would especially like to welcome my cousin Gordon and his friend Steve, who flew in from Ontario for the occasion, as you probably know by now. Some of you may recall these then young fellows who spent the summer of 1947 at the store and caused a bit of commotion at times. We look back 50 years, and we all have our own special memories of our past. Our lifestyle then was good, but simple, very different from the times in which our children and grandchildren have grown up. Material things then were less prominent. We had no phones, no electricity, no running water, and often no radio. Certainly nothing like Medicare. There was less emphasis on money because there was less of it around. We made our own fun and entertainment. In the winter, we would shovel the snow off the dugout so we could skate. In the summer, we learned to swim in the icy waters of the Wapiti River. We went boating on the river, too. And with Ray Osborne at the oars, riding in the rapids could be pretty scary. We forded the river on horseback. We rode our ponies full speed across the wide open field. I remember especially racing with Verna Elford, as our two ponies, Lady and Clubby, were pretty well matched for speed, and it was always a real competition. I might add, it was quite the same when Russell and I used to run. We all sort of competed. We had ball games and school picnics, and oh, that homemade ice cream. That was out of this world. We spent many an evening singing around the piano. We took Sunday school lessons by post and looked forward to a visit from the Van girls every summer. As well as sharing happy times, the whole district mourned with those who lost loved ones. We remember especially Lawrence Osborne, who was killed in wartime action in June of 1944, and Carl Brooks, who died in a plane crash the following year. The Pipestone Creek store and post office was really the focal point of the district in the early years of its operation. The neighbors would call once a week, and latterly twice a week, to pick up their mail and supplies. Remember when you could get chocolate bars or a package of Lifesavers for 5 cents? A pound of tea cost 70 cents. A pound of cheese, was 50 cents. A pound of butter, 60 cents. My father was a great one to barter and sell. One time, Mom arrived home from a visit to Grande Prairie to find some of her dishes missing. Father had a customer who needed the dishes more than he thought Mom did. I don't know if he ever replaced them or not. Another time, he sold my sister's cream can to a needy customer. She insisted on a brand new replacement immediately and got it too. It was always exciting every spring when the Indians from the south would arrive with all their furs, moccasins, beaded moose-hide coats, and most interestingly to me, their horses. Days of bartering would follow, and sounds of powwows on the banks of the Wapiti could be heard at night. My father got along well with the Indians, and in 1957, when he passed away, I truly realized how much he had meant to them. A.K., as he was known, was instrumental in the building of the Pipestone Creek School, situated just north of the store, opening its doors for the first time in September 1938 with Kathy Ross as teacher. The following children were enrolled at that time: Finley, Victor, Russell and Verna Elford, Alvin and Ralph Hosker, Richard and Cecil Brooks, Beverly and Richard Thornton, Nancy Wood, Pat and Joan Watts, John and Agnes White, and Ray Osborne. The school operated until 1944, when the children were van to Millerston. A few years later, the school was reopened at a new location, not far from where it now sits in the middle of the Pipestone Putters Golf Course, which some of you have probably seen. After many years of church being held at homes, in the school, or down at the river in the summer, St. Matthew's Church was moved from Wembley to Pipestone in the mid-40s. That is where some of us were married, and all the Watts grandchildren and many others were christened. Our boys spent many happy times in this building we're dedicating today with Granny and Grandad Watts, surrounded by the McAllister and Allen Giroux cousins. Like myself, they include this as an important part of their heritage. In the years that followed, when Betty and Don McAllister bought the place, our boys were always made to feel at home whenever they came back up here from our home in BC. I look back on all these years very fondly as well. In closing, I would like to personally thank Don and Betty for donating the building, helping to make this memorable event. Thanks also to Frank Stoll, Alice Fortier, Doug Clarkson, and all the others who worked so diligently to restore it to its former role. This is truly a time to remember. Thank you all for coming, and let's have a great weekend.
after that, the McAllisters bought the home and the property, and I think at this time it would be good to hear a bit from the McAllisters. Betty, would you like to come forward, please?
Nice to see so many people out this afternoon. And we would like to take this opportunity to say that we are very pleased to see our house restored. It has special memories for the family and for our family and friends. We moved to Pipestone Creek with our 4 older children, Donald, Susan, Gail, and Bonnie. In 1960, renting the land from Mrs. Watts, who was still operating the store. After we bought the land, we moved into the house, making it our home. The store was converted into more living space, with my mom coming to stay with us. During our years in the home, Lisa was born, completing our family. At different times, our nieces and nephews, Larry, Rob, Cheryl, and Sandy, made their home with us. Our children were growing up. As our children were growing up, it was busy with many young people around. We enjoyed our years in the home, sharing times with family and friends. As many people remember this house as a busy rural store, we remember all the good family times we had. Through it being restored, it is preserved for families to enjoy, allowing each person remembering what was special to them, and for others to envision and appreciate rural store settings. We should like to thank all the people who worked toward restoring this building. A project like this takes a lot of time, energy from many dedicated people.
Thank you very much, Betty. And it didn't hurt at all. We're going to have a little bit different heel here, I think. Larry McAllister, who is a grandson and a nephew, is going to try and explain the transition that took place from a store to a home and a public building to a home that was still very public. So here's Larry.
Oh, Aunt Betty, you stole most of my speech.
This is 5 minutes. Look at the newspaper he brings.
This old building has gone through many transitions. It was constructed and used for a warehouse in 1936, and then in 1937 it was hastily converted into a store and dwelling because the old store and dwelling burnt down. Many years and a whole generation later, I came along as a grandson to the storekeepers. The store, as I first remember it, was like it is here today, only way bigger, as previously mentioned. Here, during my little boyhood, I learned about chocolate bars, money, and people. I couldn't believe that there was that many people in the world. And Granny and Granddad knew the wall. Boy. The place was neat and tidy as a country store could be. I stayed here sometimes before and while I went to school at the Pipestone Creek School. There were many rules to follow here, such as to bed at 8:30, even if you weren't tired. No sliding down the banister, even if it was just the right size. And no chocolate bars if you didn't have a nickel. Boy. The people kept coming to the store to get their mail and groceries and hardware, or to sell moccasins and hides. The people just kept coming. I couldn't believe it. Then in 1963, Granny Watts, a widow by then, sold the whole farm and store to my uncle and aunt, Don and Betty McAllister. This is another transition. The whole building was made into a house. Don and Betty and family moved in. There should be a lot less people coming around now, right? Wrong. The relaxed atmosphere and continual cooking attracted many people to visit. You had to be careful even driving past in case you were lured in for tea and cinnamon buns and you ended up staying for weeks or months. The atmosphere was so relaxed that we could slide down the banister. But it was too small now. 30 or 40 people of my generation roared through this house over the next 25 years. Sometimes all at once. There was pandemonium caused, and quiet talks, lessons learned, people met, romances escalated, humongous meals consumed, witticism exchanged, tears consoled, pandemonium caused again. That's water fights. Horses rode, and more food eaten. A whole generation grew up in this store in the last 25 years. My kids have stayed in this store. I have stayed. My mother stayed. My grandmother and great-grandmother CB have stayed in this house. That makes 5 generations have lived in this house. The store was a powerful building in the Pipestone Creek community for nearly 60 years, thanks to the Watts and the McAllisters.
Larry assured me before when he showed me that manuscript that it was 4.5 minutes, and I said, ho, ho, ho. But I think he was right. A special thanks to Don and Betty McAllister at this time, and would you like to come up and bring your family up? No. Come anyway. You people know these people better than I do, but we'll get them to introduce themselves as they come past the microphone. Betty? Sue?
Carl?
Tanya?
Troy?
Lisa?
Brandon.
Gail?
Nathan.
Bonnie?
I'm Arthur.
Somebody turn chicken? We'll get you later. We just didn't know how to say thank you to the family in any other way, but we decided that maybe a plaque which says, Don, Betty McAllister, and family, in appreciation of your valued contribution to the Pioneer Museum Society of Grande Prairie and District. We also recognize the Pipestone Creek store from 1933 to 1963, which became your home, and a special retreat for others. We thank you.
Marion, I got a picture of. Do you have it on white? Yeah.
Well, I don't have much more to say. What can I say? We started all this.
And we're glad they did.
We're just about coming to an end here. Are your legs getting tired and you're worn out and ready for a chair?
Yep.
But we would like to say some special thank yous here as far coming from the museum. The roof painters. We had a roof painter that volunteered to come and paint the roof, and he never came. So about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, how long? Not very long, didn't seem like it was going to get done. Anyway, Paul Antarushu and our staff got up there and painted the gables and all the trim around the windows and the roof. And we're sure thankful they did, because we would have had an unpainted building. So thank you very much. Joan Yates. Joan and I went curtain hunting, shopping for material, and we had lots of fun, but oh my goodness, to find something that just suited Granny's likes, so and the feel that should be achieved in the house, and I hope we did it. Vicki Haunt. Vicki painted the sign up here, and she brought it in last week, and we were really pleased to have it. It originally stood on a post out in front in the yard, but we just didn't feel that there was an appropriate place for this post, so we put it on the front of the store. Frank Stoll and his wife Irene.
Oh, I see.
You know, Frank is a funny guy. We work a lot with him around here, and we get along famously. The other day, he was working away out here and had been for many days, and I came flying into the store one morning, and I said, you know, Frank, that shelf over there is so crooked. Is it? That was all that was said right then. But after lunch, there was a little sign on my desk, and it read, "Complaint Department closed for the season." He said he was reading the paper at lunchtime, and this loomed out at him, and he figured that there was an appropriate place for it, so it hangs in the office. But without Irene behind Frank and supporting him 100%, we wouldn't have had half as much work done and half as much fun out of it. So thank you very much. Doug Clarkson, he's another one that's always available to do anything and everything down here as needed. And yesterday Doug was mowing just to get it nice. so everybody could enjoy it. So thank you. That's one of the little chores, and he's been painting and doing whatever. Sometimes I wonder what gets more paint, him or the buildings, but it's obvious the building is painted. Pat and Keith Giroux, they came last week, and there was all kinds of little things that only Pat and Keith and Joan could remember at putting things, pictures, and placing ornaments and arranging furniture and so on. So thank you very much to them. Rod Giroux, and he's up there videoing all this. Is that how you say that awful word? He's also going to be able to take orders for the t-shirts and the caps and so on. So if you want a t-shirt and cap, contact Rod. Carol McAllister donated a lot of her dishes and treasures from her place and from the McAllister family. And you will find them in the store here. Helen and Jean Ellis donated their mother's and father's bedroom suite, and it was purchased in 1936, and that you will find in the center bedroom upstairs in the master bedroom. There's also some quilts there from them, and the home hooked rugs on the floor. And Ernie Watt, and Ernie is here somewhere today, and he has made a tremendous contribution as far as furnishing the store. The table and chairs, and it's not a round table, it's a square table, but beggars can't be choosers. And the one dresser in the front bedroom and the white wrought iron bed were from Ernie Watts. Also, Ernie Watt. There's a difference. There's an S on the end of Watts for the family. The artifacts from Ernie date back as far as 1897, and the bed that's up there was his mother and father's wedding bed. So it's a long ways back. There's even a feather tick on it. There's also a quilt, I believe that's in the museum at this point, and that dates back to 1847. So it's an oldie, and there's many others that his grandmother made. And a very special thank you to our staff who have been very cooperative and understanding through this whole ordeal the last couple of weeks. We've really pushed them to the hilt to get everything done. So thank you very much, staff. At this time, Frank's holding out 5 fingers, and I bet you that means 5 more minutes. No. At this time, we'd like to have Sella and Betty come up and do the official stuff. And we've got a hangman's noose up here, it almost looks like. But we didn't want to put a ribbon across the door. We wanted to have something different. So the guys made a rope yesterday with the rope making machine, and we tied it together, and they will officially cut that with AK's knife. So I don't know if it's going to cut or tear or pull. Is it sharp, George? Okay. If you'd like to come up, and we will officially declare the Pipestone Creek open at the time of the cutting. And then some of you will have to take turns and come through. can officially come through and enjoy the store. And have a good weekend. I know it's going to be a busy one for you, and feel free to come back and tour through the store as you wish. Thank you very much.